We're going to talk tonight about democracy, about elections, about government, with all the commotion in the United States now with presidential primaries and stuff like that. And also Canada is an interesting aspect in terms of its own issue of government and how you run things and so forth. The reason that's interesting is because it really touches upon how we make decisions for ourselves and how we make decisions as a community and how we get together and figure out how to live. What many people don't recognize, and this is a tie-in that's significant in terms of understanding the Jewish connection of this issue. We live in a world of rights. We live with a perception that we make decisions about what we do. And then the question is, it's like, like rowing a boat. How do we get together when we have to make decisions as a group? That's the way we sort of look at society. We make decisions on how to live as individuals, and then when decisions are bigger than us as individuals, how do we make decisions as a bigger group? What we don't recognize, or we don't fully fathom, is not just how we make decisions, but how others impose their decisions upon us. See, in America, we talk a lot about rights. Or Canada, we talk about, in Western society, we talk about rights. Everything is rights. Human rights and so forth.
Freedom for those.
Freedom for this. What we don't recognize is that in 1700, people didn't have rights. People were told what to do. In the extreme, that's the reality of slavery, in the sense that that's what slaves were about. They basically were told what to do. The essence, you talk in terms of will, the definition of a slave is that someone else decides what that person is going to do. Right? That's the concept of a slave. Someone else is making their decisions of how they will live. What we don't recognize is that was the mindset of the world prior to 1700 across the world.
Well, they must have known it was a problem because they were like in fear and all this all the time.
Yeah, but there's
nothing you could do about it.
And also people didn't rebel. There weren't really rebellions, but they had some rebellions. They had a little bit. Some rebellions.
They'd be killed or something.
Right, but the fact is the rebellions were good, but the truth is that was the concept of the idea of a value in authority. The authority was in the king. The authority was in the monarchy, the government, passed on to the hierarchy and so forth. The fact is that was the authority of understood of religion. That's really the concept of religion. It is in a certain simple form. God tells you what to do. Now the truth is, the church was very significant in maintaining the medieval aspect of the right of kings to make decisions, because the church basically said there was the divine right of kings to make decisions. So when someone was born a serf in Europe, in the feudal system, this person was told, and your job is to listen to the king or the duke whoever your Lord is. And that's what God wants from you. And you'll get your reward in the future world. But basically, the concept of religion basically said that your job is to listen to another. Ultimately, within the perception that your job is to listen to the deity. Okay? And it basically said that you don't have a right to make decisions. Ultimately, God should make decisions for you, or whoever God tells you to make decisions for you should make decisions for you. And that really was the concept of life at that point in time. The whole movement of revolutions, the French Revolution was really a revolution not just against the French monarchy, but against the Catholic Church. That's why in France, right, the term is not just freedom of religion, it's freedom from religion.
Really?
It's basically a very strong attitude, keep religion away from me. Why? Because religion wants to tell me what to do, and I don't want, and I want to be able to decide for myself what I want to do.
So
that's an aspect of rights.
Church and state, that's a part of
very much that idea. That became an attitude in America. Although America was much more freedom of religion, you should be allowed to practice your religion, but basically it was really very much keep the church away from the state, because we don't want the church telling us what to do. And really what comes about from America and from democracy is the right of the individual to decide for themselves what to do. That's really what democracy is about. You have the right to make your decision. You have the right to decide what you want to do.
But when they come up with the laws that we have,
the fact is that laws started off with impositions, and then what happened is that there was a lot of movement in laws that tried to say, because laws have to figure out a way, you can't be allowed everything. You want to go hit your neighbor. I'm sorry, there's got to be a law to protect from you. So the truth is laws came about from saying, laws really were, okay, in the world of imposition with authority, the authority said these are the laws. Right? You can't do that. You can't do this. Why? Because I'm the authority and I have the right to impose it upon you. What happened with democracy is the fact that with democracy, individuals saying, wait a second, I should make my own decisions. Well, there has to be certain rules that we apply to balance the right you have to make the decision with the right of another person to make the decision. Right? Yes, you have rights, but the other person has rights, so there have to be laws. So therefore we come up with laws that say these are how we balance different rights. And it's the people that decide the basis for the balancing. That's what democracy is about. So you have people basically saying, the movement of democracy is you should have as much right to make the decision as is correct. And then you have issues where how much should community come back and limit your right to make decisions. Okay? So you see this in terms of the present battle in the states over guns. Because the American Constitution says you have a right to bear arms. Why? It means if you want to have a gun, you have a right to have a gun. Why? Well, first of all, why shouldn't you have a gun? If you want to have a gun, why shouldn't you have a gun? Oh, because, okay, the argument is that you could possibly use the gun in a way that could hurt your neighbor. Therefore, therefore, there's a right to bear arms. But there's a limit on the right to bear arms. We're not going to let a person who has a criminal record, or the United States is not going to let a person who has a criminal record have a gun. But, right, it becomes a balancing act. What type of gun? Because we want to figure out how to, how to balance this with the need of society to be safe. But that's an aspect of the issue over here. But back in the 1700s, okay, why wouldn't you have a gun? Because the king said you can't have a gun unless I say it's okay for you to have a gun. You have no rights. Now, the point is what's significant about this is this had a lot to do with church influence. Because the church basically had a concept of divine right of kings. And therefore saying the authority of kings is reflected that this is God saying that the kings have authority. The fact is becomes an issue in terms of really what you're saying is God has the authority. And the fact is, in a certain sense, this is a fundamental concept within Torah. The idea that we are Avdei Hashem. We are the servants of God, which means God can make decisions over us. He has authority over us. He can say, this is what I want you to do. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. I don't want you to do this. Right? Why? Because God says it. The point is that
you'll have to take more than just God said so. Like there should be more.
So that becomes now. Okay, the very fact you're asking that question raises tremendous amount of issues. To some people, right, it's very simple. You have to listen to God. Right. And people sit there and say it's right to listen to God, and our whole argument is to be subject to the will of God. That's the aspect of authority, the authority of God. The point is, and the reason is, and this is something that when in the 1700s, the term that developed was autonomy. Autonomy reflects your own decision making, and autonomy challenges authority. Autonomy says you can make a decision. Authority says the authority makes a decision. And that really becomes an issue with the authority of God. So what started developing in terms of secular philosophy was what there's a value in autonomy. Point is, though, is the value in autonomy, how do you incorporate the concept of divine authority? And then comes the issue of why is it correct to listen to God? Where does God's authority come from? How does He have authority? The uniqueness within Jewish thought is the fact that we deal with that question. See, the uniqueness within Torah is at the same time that I think this is the uniqueness within Torah. At the same time we recognize the authority of God, we also recognize the value of human autonomy. We also recognize the value in human beings making decisions. Why? Because we are also to emulate God. And in order to emulate God, you also have to be a thinking being. You also have to be a decision maker.
You're saying ultimately God is doing things with a rational reasoning then.
You assume that God has a reason or purpose. We may not know it. For sure, according to the Rambam, he basically has it.
Would be to do things with a discerning.
But even aside from that, the fact is that God is God. If God is our model, then we want to. You're right. We assume that God is operating.
We just assume it. We don't know things.
We have knowledge. We have knowledge from our learning, from our studies about who Kodesh Baruch Hu is. We define him as a Tova Meitiv, good and giver of good, but we also understand that he has a wisdom beyond all our ability to comprehend wisdom.
So when we talk good, so everything is supposed to be the better way of doing things.
So therefore, when we talk about emulating him, since he is, what we say is, to put it in the correct philosophical term, we say his Ratzon is his. One aspect of his oneness is that his will and his being is one. So therefore we say that what he does is a reflection of his own will. Okay, it's not some external authority telling God what to do. It's God having it come out of His own will. It's even beyond a decision. It's a total reflection of His will. So, if we're emulating Him, there should be an aspect of what we do coming from our own will. But at the same point in time, we are also supposed to be subjects of God. We are also Ovdei Hashem. Okay, now we're Avdei Hashem. We're the servants of God, which mean, what did I say before about the word Eved, which can be translated slave, translated servant, is that the authority makes decisions for you. So it's proper for us to listen to God. Now, why is it proper for us to listen to God? So that comes about from the fact that God created us. Now, that doesn't mean God created just because God created us and sustains us, but the fact is, it's a reflection of saying that it's a reflection of our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, because He basically is the proper government of creation. What He's telling creation to do is really what's proper for creation to do. So us, as parts of creation, should follow His
is
direction.
It comparable to how I, for some reason, naturally listen to my mother?
Yeah. There's something comparable to listening to authority figures. And there's reasons for authority figures, because the fact is that there's not chaos. There's some structure in existence. The fact is that there's some aspect of listening to God in terms of this being His creation, but not just because He created it, He sustains it. It's a fact that basically He is the government of this entity which we call creation. So He basically is the authority figure in terms of how to make sure this works well, and He is a clearly competent authority figure to make those decisions. The point is, though,
but then
is that
tricky
because
we don't have Him there around like a president.
But it also becomes tricky, because part of who we are, in terms of reflecting the image of God, is to also reflect some aspects of autonomy. We also have some desire to be decision makers. See, the problem is like this. You see, what happens is like this. And this is why when you look at governments and political entities, it's important to see how it's a structure. What happened before the 1700s, let's say, is you had monarchies. It just came about that there were kings in charge of the country, and they made decisions for the country. He had good kings who actually tried to make decisions that was best for the country as they understood it. And there were other kings who basically used the monarchy to further their own ends. But the bottom line is, monarchs made decisions for their country. And serfs were told that it's right to listen to the kings, because they're the authority, they're the government. Now the truth is there has to be a government, otherwise you have chaos. So therefore, the structure of political entities before the 1700s is that there was an authority, it was kings, and people were told to listen to kings. What happened was people started saying, wait a second, we think that we can make this a better place. We're not liking the way that this authority happens. Well, what happened was with the French Revolution, there was a lot of corruption there, but it was the idea that, hey, wait a second, this is not servicing the society. You know, it's like Marie Antoinette's statement to let them eat cake, right? Now, people don't recognize what Marie Antoinette's statement was about, let them eat cake. She couldn't understand that people were starving. When the people were saying, people were saying we can't have bread, so she says, let them eat cake. Yeah. She couldn't understand there were people starving.
Yeah.
Also, it's a little bit of an insensitive
because she was totally over here and they were over here. So therefore, what happened was the population basically said, we want a new form of government that will take care of us and further the ends of the greater amount of people. So that was the French Revolution. That was obviously the American Revolution, which predated the French Revolution. The American Revolution said, we, the people, want to govern ourselves.
This happened as well, it seemed, in Jewish history. We had kings that did wrong things.
Yeah, but you didn't find too many rebellion. I mean, the fact is, you had.
It wasn't a rebellion. We couldn't really. We weren't that great of a power over the world. So
no, but even within we do have history where there
corrupted our
yeah
court systems and.
Well, we had issues with our kings, and there were issues of how to make for better societies.
Yeah.
But the concept of democracy really came about from people saying, we want to have a say in how to run the country, how to run our lives. Now, the fact is that's what we look at in our values of democracy today, and rights. We want to have a say in the authority figures that will tell us what to do. Right? So in Canada, right, Canadian people didn't like Prime Minister Harper, so they decided to elect a new Prime Minister. Why? Because they feel that Prime Minister Trudeau can do a better job for our society than Prime Minister Harper. Okay? What will be, we'll see what will happen. But the point is that people, through democracy, say we want to have a say in our authority figure. But there still has to be an authority. The authority still comes from government. Now, the point is, though, is where this becomes a little bit more of a theological issue, is how do you understand this with God? In the sense that God is the ultimate authority. And do we have a say in our relationship with God? Or is autonomy, the idea that we want to make our own decisions in the face of God, totally incorrect? That becomes a real strong challenge. I mean, people don't recognize, but that was actually the first challenge of Reform Judaism against Orthodoxy.
Well, isn't there Gemara cases with wise men, rabbis that would say things against God, and then he would make it like rain or something, like Pony and Magdala,
so the fact,
stories like that.
So those are interesting. Those are interesting cases
where they spoke out.
Right. So let me point out though that this idea is that within Judaism you also see a power of autonomy. Where do you see the power of autonomy? From the fact that the Torah system gives man a say in the determination of the final statement of God's authority through the halachic system. When we say lo b'shamayim, that the halakha is not in the hands of God, it's now in the hands of man, we're basically saying Kosh Baruch Hu gave us, really what Kosh Baruch Hu did through halakha is gave man the mechanism to make certain decisions. They show allegiance to the authority of God because they use the halachic system to make those decisions. But the fact that they are given the system they're not given the final answers, but they're given the methodology for making decisions, show that they have some aspect of autonomy. But what you're talking about is even more so is the fact that there is a value within Judaism of recognizing that autonomy reflects our emulation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, we want to be thinkers. We want to be involved. And what occurs, and this is what I was getting to, Reform Judaism, basically, their big thing was in the world that they lived in, which was the world of reason. It was a whole time where reason was very involved, the age of reason, and that really reflected the age of human beings making decisions. And Reform Judaism basically took a very strong active idea in terms of, hey, we have to be autonomous. Human beings have to make decisions. So Reform Judaism, in the early stages, was almost arguing that we can't just listen to God, because listening to God just based upon just following is not in line with our ability to be strong thinking human beings. The problem is, though, is that there's another side to us where we are also creations of God. There's another side that also recognizes that God is a proper government, proper authority. He knows the plan for this existence, for this creation, and therefore what's a proper way of living. Therefore, what happens is, through the halachic system, is some place for human beings to find some power of autonomy within the authority of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what you really have to understand, is to understand some of the challenges of democracy. Because what people don't recognize is democracy is basically took the pace of monarchy, and monarchy was this idea of authority. And democracy said, no, we want to be involved in the definition of authority. And the fact is democracy has struggled with how do human beings get involved in determining what's best for society, what's best as a collective. In certain ways, we as individuals don't even know what's best for us. We make decisions and we don't know what's best. In many ways, our knowledge is incomplete. You know, in the 1800s, you know what the way of treating diabetes was? How they used to treat diabetes in the 1800s?
They let blood out or something?
No. They used to prescribe more sugar.
What?
Now, why did they do that? Because when they took tests of diabetes, what did they find missing? Well, they found low sugar. Therefore, the way they prescribed to take care of it was give more sugar. And what's the worst thing you can do for a diabetic? More sugar. The fact is, though, is that that's based upon insufficient information. The point is that's one of the great weaknesses of us as human beings. Even as individuals, we don't have all the information. And then when you put us together as a community, we don't have all the information as a community. What you believe in when you believe in God is you believe that God has knowledge. And therefore what He is informing us to do ultimately has a purpose and has a benefit. And basically He knows more than us. That's why we listen to Him. That's one of the reasons we listen to Him. But the point is that the question is how do we still have some voice in that process? And in a certain way, with democracy, we don't recognize this real challenge of authority. You know, the truth is that the divine right of kings was weak in a certain way because the kings didn't have any more knowledge than the people. Their right to make decisions was not based upon any special knowledge of how to make those decisions. Therefore, when we go to democracy, like I said, Winston Churchill said democracy is a terrible form of government, but it's the best we have. The fact is that
we realize after so many years and prove now further
because
some system.
Because the fact is there's always a limit on government. What's the limit on government? The fact is it can only be as good as the information it has.
Yeah.
Government is always limited by lack.
Is there a system trying to improve the information, trying to improve on that, or it's just kind of like, well, this is what's set in, this is what we just do?
Government is always trying to get more information.
Yeah.
Everyone is always trying to get more information.
That makes
The
sense.
more knowledge we get, the better it is. And even if you have knowledge, the fact is, look at Nazi Germany, Mach Shemam. They were very, very smart. They didn't have the proper moral consciousness. The fact is that, and remember, and people don't recognize it, Hitler was elected by democracy, right? The fact is that in any system of government, you're going to give over authority. And the truth is you can't have a government without authority. Government needs authority, right? That's what the point of that government is. You know, there's a TV show that I like called West Wing. It's over now, but it was years ago.
Yeah, my mother liked that.
Right? And in it, there was an issue where there were three astronauts, you know, up on a in the space lab in space, and they were losing oxygen. And
I thought
there
that
was
a lawyer firm or something, West Wing.
no, that's LA law. The West Wing was a government. There was a president and the West Wing.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. Anyways, what happened was there was a space lab losing oxygen, and the astronauts would die from lack of oxygen. So they had to send up a shuttle to save the astronauts. The problem was there was no shuttle available to go up there, or it seemed to be that there was no shuttle available to go up and get the astronauts, because all the shuttles were under service that would take months. So what are they going to do? Well, it then found out that there was a special military shuttle that the United States kept secret. This is all fiction, you know, right? And then the issue came up is that do we send up this military shuttle, therefore giving up this top secret information that there is a military shuttle, or do you let these astronauts die? And the president was going back and forth on what to do and so forth and so forth. And one of his leading assistants, one of his leading ministers or whatever, leaked the information that there was a military shuttle, thereby forcing them to go up there and save the astronauts. And that's a tough decision. The point is the guy who leaked it said the president was wrong. The president got angry. He said, listen, this is my job. I'm the one who's supposed to make this decision. That's the reality of any government. That's the reality of any authority.
So he was probably fired, or
yeah, he was actually supposed to be sent to jail. Anyways, but the fact is that he basically gave up top secrets. But the point is what I'm getting at is that any decision government makes, it's based upon a yardstick. It's based upon your knowledge and so forth and so forth. And the fact is that's the reality of authority. And the point is, when you believe in God, you believe that He has a right to the authority because He knows everything. He's inherently has the right yardstick. He knows how to make the right decision. But the point is,
you have to believe in that.
Well, you have to,
because people have their problems and little things.
Right. So that's one of the things that happens in any authority system with God. You have to really develop this and understand it, and it's a challenge in its own right, because a lot of things you don't understand, because God has chosen not to tell us the reasons for everything.
Like one of the hardest things is like the laws on gay acts and stuff like that.
In our world today, this becomes extremely challenging. Now, the truth is that some people just basically ignore, well, God's the authority and tells us right and wrong. But the point is, if you do that just without any thinking whatsoever, then it challenges your own autonomy. And your own autonomy means you have to be an understanding individual. You have to think. You have to have your own issue. And the fact is, that's also an aspect of emulating God, because you have to understand. See, a lot of people don't recognize this. If you were just supposed to just follow God, then it would have been enough for the Jewish people to just say Nasa. It would have been enough for them just to say Nasa. We're going to do it. God tells us to jump. We'll ask how high, because He knows the right answer. Nasa and Nishma is a very special statement, because Nasa and Nishma says we understand the Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's not right. It's not enough for us just to do. Yeah, you know everything. What you're telling us to do is absolutely correct. Especially at that point in time, because they had no issue about it really being God. So they knew what God would tell them to do would be right. You know what I mean? I mean, people point this out. I mean, what was the big thing of saying Nasa? God tells you to do something. Has all knowledge. He's all good. Right? Why would you think not to do what God tells you to do? Right? I mean, God's telling you to do something is obviously the best thing to do. The problem is you can't stand up, you can't make that decision to know why. And that's the aspect of Nishma. And that is also the aspect of us emulating God. And that comes about from us being able to...
Well, eventually human nature is to like want to understand, want to...
Because we want to emulate.
Do something enough.
We want to emulate God.
Have knowledge of it.
Right, so we want to emulate God. Therefore we have to figure out, it's our job also to figure it out. The problem is that if it only becomes our decision, then we don't have the correct recognition. First of all, we can't know everything that God does, and second of all, because we will not then have the correct relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu as the creator of the world, as the sustainer of the world, as the true authority figure. So we are caught in this balance.
To know certain controversial questions on like laws that were placed. Yeah. It would be good to know like something like, because we're kind of up in the air about certain things. And the fact is we have now, you know.
That's what we have to struggle with. That's what Nasa and Nishma is about. We have to struggle with. But the point is that in many ways it comes down to the idea that we have to understand this. There's authority and there's autonomy, and we need both. But the fact is that how they connect is very hard. But the truth is that we don't recognize that that's an issue in democracy. Before the 1700s, when autonomy really wasn't very powerful, people were told what to do, and they just did it. People just said, "I'm going to," and religion supported that. The church supported that. You're a serf, just listen to the king, and you'll get your kingdom of heaven. Don't ask any questions. But the fact is, Judaism never just said that. Judaism always struggled with trying to understand Kadosh Baruch Hu, even as we listen to him. Right? So the point is that then it became a bigger issue in terms of democracy, because we now live in a world where autonomy has now taken over. So we don't even understand this concept of authority. We give authority to government, but we really don't understand the value of authority, because who says this government really has any better knowledge? And the only way we give authority is because it comes from the people, and they're elected. But the fact is, then we question a lot of aspects of decision makings. So the truth is, we live in a world that actually stresses much more of autonomy. But the fact is that becomes a bigger problem in terms of dealing with the authority of Torah, because the authority of Torah actually emerges from a recognition of God. Now, you're raising another issue is, how do you know this understanding of God? The fact is that one of the big problems with proving the existence of God is it's not just proving the existence of God. It's proving the existence of a benevolent, all-knowing God. It's a remarkable thing that people don't recognize, that when people argue about the proof of God and so forth, you have to really understand what you're really proving. And the fact is, what you're really proving is to prove a God that has a right to be the authority. And then you have to understand why you're listening to the authority. And then from a Jewish perspective, you have to understand how you balance that with your own autonomy, which itself has value. Okay?
So what would be like so much of like a stretch to want to understand or have proof of God in that sense? Like, I understand it's a lot more, but let's say because there's limits, there's levels you can express, not as intensive amounts, let's say, of God, but like a certain amount that you would understand, but enough to know more, you know, like that's a possibility.
Yeah, we all struggle with trying to find an understanding that we can live with. What you're saying is that in many ways we can't, you see, in many ways we can't even comprehend God.
Because that, well, to the extent that it's beyond us, but there's certain things that we've come to understand, or explain through Torah that we can kind of grasp our minds on.
And that's why the focus from a Torah perspective is always on the authority aspect. You see, you know, it's interesting, because I was once speaking to a conservative rabbi, and he was talking how unfortunate it was that there wasn't that much theological studies within Judaism. He was talking about how when he goes into theology, he has to read all the theological words out there in the world and the big study of religion and so forth and so forth. And it's like the statement I always make about Buber. Okay, Martin Buber. I think he's a great Christian theologian. Right? Why? Because he talks all about religion and I, thou, and my relationship with God. And Lahavdil does have connections to Chassidus and so forth, but what's the one thing he's missing? The one thing he doesn't deal with, which he totally rejects, is halacha. But that's really what it's about. It's about God, the authority figure. God's concept is structure, and the Mistagid argument, let's say, of Rav Chaim, is that you can't really know God, but you can know what God, what God's will is. Therefore, you want to know what God wants you to do. But the truth of the matter is, that's really the tension of the human being. God as the authority figure, running this world. Why? Because He's all-knowing. Because of the end. And what's His basis of being the authority figure? But the point is that first of all, how do you know He's the authority figure? And then, how do you deal with your own autonomy and your own relationship with the authority figure, which is an issue that exists even in democracies. As democratic as you may be, right? There's a certain level of authority. You take what happened. What was it? Just recently, where they had that whole issue of guys taking over a place down in the States. It was, these militias down in the States. They don't want any authority, right? They want real freedom, no freedom from government. The fact is that there are authority figures. You can't, you have to stop at red lights, right? If you're going to have a society. But the fact is that, okay, so how do you handle this with your own autonomy? But the problem is that tension is very. But you bring God into it, then how do you even know that God has this? Now the truth is that the remarkable thing about Judaism, which a lot of people don't recognize, is that these issues are right built into the system because Judaism wants you to deal. Torah wants you to deal with these issues, because this is the tension of our very being as human beings. We want to emulate Kadosh Baruch Hu. We also want to be Eved Hashem. We also want to correctly follow His authority. And the point is you really see this with, let's say, concepts of Tinnik Shenishma. Tinnik Shenishma is someone who's not brought up from, is not deemed culpable for not observing mitzvot. Why? Because the fact is the person has no basis for accepting God's authority. He wasn't brought up. He wasn't taught. Right? Like the Rambam says about the Karaites. It says the people who were brought up on the Karaite philosophy can't hold them culpable. Why? Because they were taught a different philosophy of life. They weren't talked about God as we understand Him. They were talked about God as Karaites presented them. So how do you expect them to be culpable, to be responsible for our understanding of the Kodesh Baruch Hu? Now the truth is wait a second. Does that mean everyone is off the hook because they can't figure things out? No. There's got to be some limit on that as well, right? What some Nazi was born with some crazy anti-Semitic intent. Does that mean that he's not culpable? No. The fact is that this is the challenge of existence. But everyone's challenge of existence is different. But when we start talking about democracy and elections and so forth, we look at what's going on in the United States and all the elections and so forth. You look at it and say, this is a crazy way to elect a government. I mean, I really think it's. I mean, you look at this and you kind of wonder about this.
Is there people in high places or in that system trying to say this structure is just not working? Let's
but no one knows a better one.
How to better it? That's why,
originally, democracy, to be able to have a vote, with democracy, you have to be a landowner. You have to have own property. Okay, why? Because they felt you had to have some brains to make it, to be able to make such a decision of who should govern, and hopefully someone who has a little bit of wealth must have a little bit of brains because he's been successful, he owns property, and so forth and so forth. That didn't work so well either, because some of those people were very, very self-interested in their own developments. The point is that therefore, there was extension of the right to vote. I mean, the point is that if is IQ a basis? Should you sit there and say, oh, someone should only be allowed to vote if they have 120 IQ? Well, I gave you the example from Nazi Germany, right? Nazi Germany was recognized as a very intelligent country, right? They had remarkable scholarship. They, the University of Berlin was the Harvard of Europe, right? Right? And he elected Adolf Hitler, Yimach Shemo. So there are so many issues. The uniqueness within Torah is that we deal with this issue. I don't think we say we're working on a solution, but we attempt to deal with this issue. And we attempt to try and understand the struggle. Why? Because that's the human struggle. A lot of people make a mistake about life. They think life is all, like we talk about this thing of the gray. Life is about balancing, right? Your own self-interest with the interest of others, right? The authority of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with our responsibility also to emulate Him, which means we have to have some level of autonomy. This is all. It's all a unique type of balancing. You don't balance by saying we'll do it this time, sometime like this. You have to figure out how to integrate the two. It's a challenge, and a lot of people don't recognize that within Torah. The fact is that a lot of issues that exist in the world today are Torah issues. You mentioned the thing about gays, right? It's a tremendous challenge.
I mean, that's like a
tremendous challenge because people are born that way.
Right. And it's like you're saying.
Right.
These people are horrible, bad people.
Well, no, that's the whole problem.
Saying that,
so there's two issues involved.
Mentally,
it's very. But the truth is to articulate the issue correctly. I saw something put out. There's a Maharat in the Shar HaShamayim synagogue in Montreal. Okay, and she wrote an article about gays, and she was very upset because her kids teacher, and obviously she sends her kids to a day school, from day school, whatever, and in it the teacher said men marry women, women marry men, men don't marry men, and women don't marry men, and this woman got very, very upset. Okay, so it's not true. In our world today, men marry men and women marry women. That's the way it is in Canada.
The mother said that?
The mother said that. And the problem is that what you're really articulating is, yes, it's true, in Canada we have gay marriages. The point is what you're really stating is Al-Pi Torah, there's no such thing as a gay marriage, because Al-Pi Torah,
it's not acceptable.
Well,
should be killed, it says.
Well, wait a sec. I'm talking about marriage right now. Kedushin Artovsim, a marriage can't be bonded unless it's a man and a woman who are mutter to each other. Okay? So like a daughter can't marry a father. Why? Because it's Uriah, so they can't get married. Okay? So the point is that that's just
saying marriage is one thing.
No, wait a sec. If you want to tell me people do this, that's one thing. Okay? There's another thing to understand. The halacha says it's incorrect. Now, the point is you have a halacha saying something's incorrect and something's asur that people do. Now, how do you look at it? So already in the think in the early 90s, I wrote an article. The article is actually on our website. If you go to our website, the Nishma website, if you look under subject matter, if you look in our library under subject matter, there's a whole section of articles on sexuality and homosexuality, and one of the articles dealt with the March for Israel parade, and it deals with this issue of wait a second, let me just make my point. The fact is what I point out in that article is that the fact is there are many people that don't follow halacha. The question is homosexuality in the category of a chok or a category of a mishpat? What do I mean? Do you look at it in the same way that you look upon someone who's a murderer, or do you look at it in the same way as someone who eats cheeseburgers? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can have someone who's Machal Shabbos come into your house and you won't get upset. You won't feel uncomfortable. The guy doesn't keep Shabbos. The guy who come into your house who's a thief, you may not be too comfortable with him, right? You know, the fact is though is that there's different attitudes we have to sins. There's certain sins that we have one attitude, certain sins you have another attitude. So the truth is that you have people here who sin according to halacha, but are you supposed to see them in the same category you see someone who doesn't keep Shabbos? You're supposed to see them in the same category as someone who is a thief. The point is it seems these people are following their drives, and their drives are not just physical, sexual drive. The drive is a drive for relationship. Now the point is then why is it that Kodesh Baruch Hu said they can have a relationship? That's a big issue. I don't have an answer to that question. But the fact is that
only because they could be a good, positive person.
Yes,
and everything
that's exactly it. So the point is that's exactly it. So the fact is that leads to a more intense question. We have to know that.
So what we understand why it was such an extreme decree upon such a person.
The truth is,
I would think of it was, what were the cases when we had people who acted such ways in the Torah? They were usually not just gay, but they would go and try to.
But you know
someone,
something?
like they go into someone's house and they take the guy. Like it.
Yeah, I mean we're not talking about violence or something. But let me point out something to you. I use the example of Chilul Shabbos. What's the punishment for someone who's Mechalel Shabbos? What's the punishment according to the Torah? Shigila. The strongest form of punishment.
Yeah.
Now, what's the punishment for someone who has a homosexual act? It's also skila. So you look at it and say that, okay, fine, but let me ask you something. If I told you, you see a nice Jew driving down the street on Shabbos, I told you we're going to pull him out of the car and stone him to death, what would you say about it?
Well, you can't because of the government system, but would we do that?
Would we do it? Well, there's one little problem.
If we had a Jewish system.
Yeah. What do you need in order to stone someone in the Jewish system?
Witnesses.
Yeah, not just witnesses. 2 white witnesses who give a warning, and the guy responds by saying, "I know," and it's us. And I think it's the Rosh, and the Rosh says something very powerful. He says, if you think someone is stoned because of Chilul Shabbos, you're missing the point. You understand something, okay? You see a guy eating a cheeseburger, or you see a guy. Let's say you see a guy being Mechalel Shabbos. If he wants to go along with Chilul Shabbos, when he's warned by the witnesses, the Torah says not to do it. All he has to do is keep his mouth shut, and he gets away with it. The court can't do anything.
Make
right?
Sure he's not seen.
No, not even that.
But then
wait a sec. No, wait a sec. The guy is shouted in public. Okay, doing Chilul Shabbos right in public.
Yeah.
Okay, and you tell him point blank, if you do it, it's Keneged Torah, and the guy keeps his mouth shut. He's totally off the hook.
Like if he doesn't say like
right,
anything,
he has to say Afal I know that it's forbidden, right, I'm still going to do it. So the Rosh points out he's not being killed for Chilul Shabbos. He's getting killed because he's saying that about God. I don't care what God's telling me to do.
To go against.
It's basically saying, right? He says, but Chilul Shabbos. Okay. He's sleeping with some woman who he's not supposed to be sleeping with, right? And the guy says, that's also, you shouldn't be doing that, and the punishment is death, right? In the case of punishment, let's say by incest, right? And he just sits there and says nothing, just goes ahead, keeps doing it right there, doesn't say anything. Court can't do anything to him. So if he just wants to have his cake and eat it too, just let him keep his mouth shut.
What's going on in his mind? Like, is it? He's not trying to obviously then.
The fact is
something wrong.
The fact
he's
is
trying to say there's nothing
if he
wrong
just
with
if he just wanted the pleasure,
he's not trying to go against.
If he just wanted the pleasure, just keep his mouth shut. That's what the Rosh says. Do it. Keep it. Now, of course, Baruch Hu may have something to say about it. He may have a reaction, but the fact is that that's not the point. The point is in terms of our relationship with that person. So when we read statements about this guy dying, that guy dying, that's a totally different situation. The point is,
situation of a guy dying, like
when we see statements in Pasuk, this person is punished with death, that person, it says, wait a second.
When were they actually done? You're saying like they weren't actually. Like,
the fact is that in order to get the death penalty, you have to meet these standards. So the point is that in a normal case, something might that's something different. But the fact is that you
and the person will feel guilty their whole life.
Well, that's between them and God. So now you're raising another issue.
Putting in their mind that it's something wrong. Okay, you could do it, but there's something wrong.
No, wait a second. I didn't say it's okay. You're right. There's something wrong. Kodesh Baruch Hu says it's wrong. Now the question is this person then has to deal with it. Why would God say it's wrong? And you're right. That's a big issue. I'm not denying that. The fact is,
psychologically is very hard on a person.
And I'm not saying it's an issue. The truth is that the very issue of why God created individuals this drive, and we don't, and then said it's forbidden, is not an easy issue. And there are people who try to do it. The point is one thing for sure, is that you can't define a person with that drive as inherently evil or something wrong. There are people who are gay.
But that's how Jewish people look at it.
So that's a problem. That's a problem.
Something evil, wrong.
No, the fact is that person has a drive. There's kleptomaniacs. They have a drive to steal. You know?
Well, even
the truth of the matter is,
straight people have the drive for the opposite sex.
Exactly.
And that's everybody.
Exactly.
And it's accepted, so therefore, in Torah wants that to happen.
That's true. But the point is that you understand the Christian idea, where Christians basically have an attitude that, but they don't understand it. If it's they have to have an idea. The drive is bad. So therefore, Christians have to say necessary evil, and sex is bad, because it's a drive, but you have to know when to apply it, when not to apply it, and so forth. But the truth is that in many situations, right, the normal sexual drive can cause people to do a lot of errors. Okay? And we don't sit there and say, whoa, heterosexuals, ooh, evil people, because they can do sins. Homosexuals have a problem. Why? Because they have a drive that seems to not have any way of being met, and that's a unique that's a unique issue within Torah, because Christianity says you're right. Really, the heterosexual drive, I mean, it's not Christianity, but Catholicism, the heterosexual drive, all should not really be met by not really be satisfied by a real righteous person. But the point is that we don't look at the heterosexual person as inherently evil. We shouldn't look at the homosexual person as inherently evil. There's an issue the Torah says this person cannot act upon this drive. Made a statement that she was upset with how her daughter, I think one of her kids' teachers responded to gays, is that there's a big issue between saying that a gay person is evil, that's for sure wrong, or saying, listen, the act is Asur al Pi Torah, right? And I understand the struggle of someone who has this drive, who can't find a legitimate way to satisfy the drive. But the point is that it's true that a lot of people want to look at gays, and just by the fact that they have this drive, as being a problem, as being evil, and that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with the fact is, a person who's gay, it's the way they're created, and we can have a certain amount of empathy with them, okay, while still saying the act still is Asur according to halacha. Then we have to deal with why does Kodesh Baruch Hu have this Isser, and there are a lot of problems with that. But one thing for sure is we don't judge people. See, one of the things that people mistake in religion in general is religion basically makes it seem that everyone in religion has some kind of authority to judge everyone else. One of the things within Torah is that it's not our job to judge people. Okay, that's a Kodesh Baruch Hu's place. That's not ours. Okay, and that makes a big difference. Anyways, what time is it? It's getting late, right? Okay. Anyways, what we're dealing with is authority and autonomy. I'm trying to deal with authority and autonomy, and we'll follow through more on this topic. The truth is that your decision making has value, because that shows that you're trying to emulate a Kodesh Baruch Hu. But there's an aspect of authority. In our world today, we are really subject to this idea because of the whole concept of democracy, and democracy really fostering autonomy, which really challenges people who have a concept of divine authority. Okay? Because we don't really understand, in our world today, they don't understand the idea that you're listening to authority outside of you. Okay? The problem was before the 1700s, the opposite was the other way around. Because there was only authority, and there was no perception of any value in the human autonomy. So now we've gone to, with democracy, development of a value in human autonomy, which basically challenges the concept of divine authority. Okay, and we'll talk more about this.